Labour need to be very careful. They are not offering anything that excites anybody. Merely opposing a Conservative government is not enough. There's no excitement in it. There's no hope in it of what young people can look forward to in society. Hope is a very precious commodity, and it's not on offer. The attitude of Labour MPs varies between the normal friendly relationship I have with many of them and others who pretend I don't exist. People just walk past you like you're not there, but I don't particularly care. I'm there to represent people. I'm not there for advancement within a particular party, and I just think it's quite petty. Parliament only exists because of rebellion of people in this country, and we sometimes, maybe all newly elected MPs should be sent on a crash course on British history.
Hello, Jeremy.
Hi,
Sorry.
how are you?
I interrupted you.
You didn't interrupt me at all. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, you're running.
I am running.
As an independent.
Indeed so.
And why is that?
We announced last Friday, took a decision. Well, as you know, I was suspended from the Labour Party in 2020. I appealed, was reinstated unanimously by the National Executive 3 weeks later, and then suspended from the Parliamentary Labour Party, and that continued. I was not given a right of appeal on that. Then a proposal was made to the National Executive by the party leader that I be not allowed to be a public representative of the Labour Party on the grounds that I would be damaging the Labour image. And that was agreed. I then protested about that and asked for my rights to a hearing, my rights to an appeal. And I was told by David Evans, who's the General Secretary of the party, that the rules of natural justice did not apply in the Labour Party.
Right.
Wonderful. And they then, next step was, they then, instead of having the normal selection process in Islington North, where the party members and affiliates have a right to what they call a trigger ballot to decide whether they're going to be a candidate or not, that was denied. They then applied for candidates. I don't know how many, various people put their names in. They then drew up a short list of 2, which was allegedly going to be voted on a Zoom call vote. It would have been, I think, tonight or tomorrow or something. And then one of the candidates mysteriously withdrew with no explanation, and one person has been appointed the candidate. So not one member of Islington North Labour has any participation, say, or anything else whatsoever. And I was under a lot of encouragement from local people that you've represented us all these years, we'd like you to carry on. And it's a big decision, so eventually I decided, and we announced last Friday morning. And since then, we've been out on the streets campaigning, leafleting, meeting people, and getting a whole campaign underway. Fantastic numbers of volunteers and supporters have come along to help. And it's a great campaign, but it's not about me. It's absolutely not about me. It's about the politics of it. It's about the kind of society we want to live in. Do we want more inequality or less? It is about young people, housing, excessive private sector rents, excessive levels of university fees, and low pay for many young people working, we were just chatting before we started, in the gig economy with no security whatsoever. So those are all of the issues that I'll be campaigning on. Obviously also, and part of it really, the environmental issues of a Green New Deal, which I'm proud to say I proposed in Parliament in 2019, climate emergency, which was agreed. So first Parliament in the world to do it, was on the basis of a proposal from us. And obviously issues of the arms trade and peace. And that's why I've continually spoken out for peace and a diplomatic solution to conflicts around the world. The conflicts in Congo, in Yemen, in Ukraine, in Gaza, in West Papua, and so on around the world. And so if I'm elected, I'll continue being that voice.
Well, let's start on you've been a very vocal supporter of Gaza, a very vocal critic of Israel's intervention into Gaza. You were still a Labour Party member during, for the past for the past couple of years, even while you haven't been a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party. But did you think did that feel dichotomous to you? Did you feel comfortable standing in a Labour Party whose position is perhaps, well, more centre to where yours is on Gaza?
I made my own position very, very clear, and in terms of a vast number, majority perhaps, of Labour Party members, they weren't disagreeing with me. And certainly the local Labour Party members in Islington North, absolutely supportive. So I joined the Labour Party when I was 16, been in it ever since, and it's been absolutely, totally part of my life. And to be honest, it felt quite strange. Suddenly, for the first time since I was 16, I'm not a member of the Labour Party. But politics is more important than parties. Causes are more important than people.
Does it hurt you on a personal level?
It hurts me the way, not just me, but an awful lot of people have been treated. And I've had a lot of letters, a lot of emails and so on from former Labour Party members around the country whose whole life, often in quite conservative areas, has been supporting the Labour Party, standing up probably to a lot of hostility within their community, but they felt they had to do that because that's what they believed in. And they just feel they've been let down, thrown out and forgotten. And there's been levels of trauma for many people that are actually quite profound, quite sad. Some of the stuff I've had, the letters and stuff I've had, so I keep in touch with a lot of people. And when we've been doing these Poetry for the Many events through the Peace and Justice Project around the country, our book Poetry for the Many, huge numbers of people turn up who not necessarily always interested in poetry, but interested in why Len McCluskey and I would be doing a poetry book. They thought it was a bit wacky, to be quite honest. And then after the event, they're coming up and telling me all about their life story and so on. It's fascinating. And that's reaching people in a way that a partisan political speech never would.
And so is this what gives you confidence then to run as an independent in Islington North? Because you think that there is still the public strength of feeling to have you there as representative?
That's all the impression I've had over the past... We're not even 4 days into the campaign yet, but I've been walking all around the constituency. Well, I do that anyway. People have been very friendly, very kind, very supportive, and asking... The only question I've had was that... Will you standing here let the Conservatives in? And I said, no, absolutely not, because the breakdown of the vote in Islington North for the last two elections was around 70% of the vote for Labour, me as a candidate at that time. So even if that split 50-50, you still get either me or a Labour candidate elected. But I'm standing, putting my name forward, putting it out there. On the politics of it and the issues of giving people hope. It's not personal about me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just for the benefit of people who don't quite understand sort of parliamentary procedure, what sort of things can you do as an independent? Because there might be some questions over if you're not affiliated to the Labour Party, will you have as much sway? Well, particularly in the chamber, but you can still put down motions, or you can still fight for them in Parliament. I mean, how does that work?
There'll be more
Okay.
opportunities, more influence. As a member of Parliament, you're elected, even if you're a Labour candidate, Conservative, Lib Dem, whatever it is, you're elected individually to Parliament. Now, which side of the chamber you sit depends on who's in government. And you can then ask questions and so on. If you're a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party, they're put under an enormous amount of pressure what to say and what not to say in the chamber. Some of them completely ignore it and just get on with it. Some are heavily influenced by that, and the question of appointments to committees is usually made by on a basis of party numbers, but there's also an allocation for independents or small parties and so on. And so if I'm elected as an independent, I will do all the things that I've always done, the motions I'll put, the questions I'll raise, the committees I will attend, and the causes I'll take up. But I won't have a Labour Party to report to locally. And I've thought about that because over all these years, essentially, my reporting has been to and through the Labour Party in the community. That avenue will not be available. And so instead, there will be a monthly assembly in which I will report back on what I've been doing. and invite other organisations to come and speak. So I'm expecting the first one will be on housing, when I would invite Acorn or other groups to come along, describe what they're doing on housing, describe what campaigns we have, particularly to bring about a private rented sector. I can and will be amending legislation. I mean, if the Labour government comes up with a proposal to completely take Royal Mail back into public ownership, I'll support it. If they say we're going to take it back in but still allow the private sector to compete with the publicly owned Royal Mail, I would try and amend it to remove that sort of thing. Same applies to rail public ownership. And on issues of poverty and benefits, I will be absolutely resolute in demanding an end to the two-child policy. It's cruel, unnecessary and disgraceful. It's impoverishing children.
And it's an odd policy, I would say, for the Labour Party to adopt. Were you surprised that the Labour leadership wanted to keep the two-child benefit cap?
Even I was astonished at that. It seems to me, if you're serious about ending poverty in Britain and you recognise that, what's the latest question from the Trussell Trust was 3 million accesses to food banks. 3 million people using food banks in modern Britain. And that's up from 0 20 years ago or 25 years ago. Well, that says a lot. Now, I go to all of our local food banks. I meet a lot of people there. There's lots of reasons why they're poor, often low wages. Many of them are in work, but some of them are families who may or may not be in work on universal credit, and large family, nothing for child 3, 4, 5. They're losing a lot of money every year. And so the total cost of reinstating a universal benefit for all children would be about 1.3 billion a year. And from that, you would take about 300,000 children out of absolute poverty. It can be done. But also as a moral question, is a child worth less because they're in a big family?
One that Suella Braverman, I think, acknowledged.
Yes. Everybody has their day. And she is right about that, but I hesitate to say she's right about anything else.
And the stop clock and all that, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. I mean, she and I, you'd be a bit astonished to find we're not close.
No?
No.
I've got to ask you about Diane Abbott. There was quite an interesting expose from Newsnight that came out this morning that showed that Diane Abbott last year had been told she could complete an anti-Semitism online e-learning course, and there had been receipt of her completing the course, but she still had not heard back from the Labour leadership about the whip being reinstated. A couple of questions. The first thing is, do you think that Diane Abbott should have the whip reinstated?
Yes, Diane has been disgracefully treated by the Labour Party and by particularly the individual national officials of the party, all of them. She was first elected, first black woman into Parliament in 1987. I remember that day very well, along with Paul Boateng, Keith Vaz and Bernie Grant. The four of them were elected in that election. I remember it very well. I obviously knew them all very well at the time and still do. Well, Bernie sadly no longer with us. Diane is a trailblazer in lots of ways and has been more abused than any other member of Parliament at any time. The abuse she receives, and if you go through her X messages and the feed with it, it makes you sick. The third or fourth one you read, just the levels of abuse she has to put up with and the threats she gets. And I think her office probably hides quite a lot of them from her. I hope they do, because it is disgusting what she's put up with. And the way she's now just been hung out to wait around for somebody to make a decision. And obviously the story that Newsnight had is correct, that she has done all the things that they asked her to do, and they still just leave her in limbo. So my support is totally there for Diane. She's my parliamentary neighbour. We obviously cooperate on issues around Finsbury Park, where she's one side of the road and I'm the other. And if she's reinstated, good. If not, she's again got a choice of her own decision what to make. But whatever she does, I'll support her.
What do you make of the Labour Party welcoming in someone like Natalie Elphicke, but still not making a decision on Diane Abbott?
Well, there were quite a lot of comments about that. Natalie Elphicke, who is, her views on desperate people crossing the Channel, on all other aspects of policy are pretty awful. She apparently at some stage claimed she was in favour of some form of private sector regulation in housing. I must say I didn't really notice it if she was, but probably was. She's welcomed into the party. Diane is hung out to dry, and I'm removed from membership. What does that say to people that have given their lives to the cause of socialism, social justice in our society, that they don't matter anymore? It's horrible. So Natalie Elphicke is then welcomed into the party. Diane Abbott threatened with being driven out.
Were you ever offered that e-learning course on anti-Semitism?
Don't think so.
Would you have completed it if you had been?
They want me to. Listen, I think we can all learn. And I think it's important to be humble enough to understand you can all learn. And I think that is a good thing for everybody to do. And indeed, in my own sphere, we always make sure that people get all the training and awareness they need. And I remember discussing all this with Bernie Grant many, many years ago. When Bernie became a councillor with me in Haringey in the 70s, I remember quite a sort of profound discussion about 10 of us had one Sunday evening about racism awareness training. And so it's not a new thing. Bernie was absolutely on it at the time and later became a leader of Haringey and did a great deal to introduce that sort of thing. And then you see 20, 30, 40 years later, you see the effect of that in the attitudes of people that are now quite senior in many areas of local government. It's important that we do understand things, and that comes also from an understanding of history and the use of language and the way that it discriminates against people. And we're just talking outside here before we came in, and we're taking coffee across the road. Young guy, asylum seeker, waiting 2 years for a decision. I won't say any more about the case because I don't want to identify him, but anyone that looks at him, listens to his case, should understand something about history and the way it has created a situation where people have to seek asylum somewhere else. If he gets it, he's going to be a great guy. He's going to make his contribution to our world. That's what asylum seekers do.
Which, of course, all of the training that you're talking about just there is being combated now by the, I think, the Minister for Common Sense. She is trying to remove any sort of structural training on racism. I believe Esther McVeigh.
The Minister for Common Sense.
Esther McVeigh, yes, the Minister for Common Sense.
It really sounds like something out of Monty Python,
yeah.
doesn't it?
The thing is,
like the Minister for Silly Walks, Minister for Common Sense, yeah.
I think we're meant to say it with a straight face as well, which I think is quite difficult.
Can you say it? Try it.
Well, I did just a moment ago, and I think
you smiled there. I saw it.
I can't do it. Jeremy, look, I just have to ask you, because I think that the timeline is sort of confusing, because this has come out now about Diane Abbott. She's been offered this training, we've now heard that she hasn't heard from the Labour leadership, and so she is in limbo. What actually happened to you in the couple of years while you've been a member of the constituency Labour Party and you haven't been a member of the parliamentary party? Was there any communication between yourselves and the Labour leadership? Was there any update that was ever given to you, or any training offered to you?
No, not at all. There was no, despite many requests from Islington North, many requests from union leaders and many others, no discussion, no negotiation, no communication with me at all. And the one time in late 2020, when Len McCluskey and others went to meet the party leadership, they then denied the meeting had happened. And so it's been really strange. And in Parliament, I'm obviously there. I go in most days. Obviously it depends what the business is. And the attitude of Labour MPs varies between the normal friendly relationship I have with many of them, particularly sort of local people, those in the Socialist Campaign Group and so on, and others who pretend I don't exist. So it's sort of like you're walking around and like people just walk past you like you're not there. It's like sort of the man who never was. But I don't particularly care. I'm there to represent people. I'm not there for advancement within a particular party. And I just think it's quite petty. And it is petty. We're there because people laid down their lives to build a democratic society, to get the right to vote, to get the right to free speech and assemble. All those things are under threat. Parliament only exists because of rebellion of people in this country. And we sometimes, maybe all newly elected MPs should be sent on a crash course on British history, the real British history.
Is there an argument that if the Labour leadership hasn't acknowledged you or acknowledged that you're still there in the seat, or had any conversation with you, is there an argument that they've sort of thrown that safe seat away?
No, absolutely not. It's not being thrown away.
By Labour?
By Labour, yes, by Labour in that sense. If I'm elected, I will represent it, and I'll represent it with the same values and principles that I've always represented it. Mm. And that's not going to change. And they're not on sale.
Are you a socialist?
Yes.
Is Keir
I'm
Starmer?
proud to be a socialist. Socialism is what? From each according to their means, to each according to their needs.
Keir Starmer says he's a socialist as well.
Yes, but he didn't give any definition of it afterwards, and then went on to say the party had been endorsed by 150 businessmen. And Rachel Reeves this morning told us that the Treasury under her will be the most pro-business there's ever been, and there's going to be no increases in taxation. Well, I want to see a lot of changes in taxation, probably raising the income tax threshold at the bottom end to a much higher level, which would take an awful lot of the lowest paid out of sometimes the very bad poverty they're in. But that means you've got to compensate at the other end, which means increasing corporate taxation, bringing in a wealth tax, which will bring in quite a lot of money, and ending non-dom status, which everybody says they're going to do, but I've yet to see the details of how they're going to do it, and having a much higher income tax level for those earning large sums, so bring back 50% income tax rate. I think these things are absolutely essential. We now have a more divided society than ever, and more desperation of people just living on the margins of our world. I mean, you see it all around here. I mean, you see ridiculous levels of wealth around this place, here in Clerkenwell in London, which is apparently the most cool place to live on the planet.
You're doxing us, Jeremy, but thank you. Doxing us.
Right, so, but there you go. Then you see the people begging, the people sleeping rough, and so on, and the levels of mental health stress and the levels of debt people have. And so if we're going to walk by on the other side, then what do? Create more of a security state to make us feel protected against the problems that the poorest bring, or do you bring about a more equal society? It's a choice.
Because Islington North is one of those constituencies that has extraordinary wealth and extraordinary poverty as well.
Yeah, it does.
Right.
It does. It has very high levels of income from a very small number of people. Those very big houses around Highbury Fields, for example, don't come cheap. Yet only 400 metres away, there is a number of estates, and some of the people on those estates are very, very poor. Yet within what are seen as very leafy areas, you then find housing, multiple occupation, very expensive private sector rent with people on UC and benefits there. And I was walking along Tufnell Park Road yesterday, which is very long road, lots of houses, and you can see what's happening. You get the house that's been recently bought by somebody with lots of money. They always paint it with matte paint. I don't know if this is a sign of wealth or something. Matte paint front door, very expensive looking bell, and somebody had outside one of them a brush for your feet that looked like a cat lying down. Clever. I thought, boy, must have cost a bit. What would you do that for? What's the point of that? And then you see alongside it the house that's not been painted, lots of different types of bells on the door, screaming at you HMO. And the income from each of those maybe 6 or 8 flats in that would be probably nearly £2,000 a month from that sort of property.
Each, yeah.
Maybe well more than that for 6 of them. And you look at the amount of money that can be made out of the private rented sector. That's when we've got to control private sector rents. They do it in the USA, they do it in Germany, they do it in France. Why not here?
Have you ever thought about proposing a ban on developing houses like that into flats?
Yes. One way, well, not so much to ban development of flats, because sometimes very big 18th, 19th century houses need to be developed into flats. 2 things. One is the quality of the conversion needs to be good, particularly sound insulation. You wouldn't believe the number of problems I get of families who cannot tolerate the noise of children above them. The children are not particularly noisy. It's just there's no insulation. So kids jumping around, sounds worse than it really is.
It's not been built properly.
Yeah. And so proper conversion, and also minimum space standards for bedrooms, bathroom, kitchen, and so on. So yes, I think there needs to be far better controls, and where possible, my council, Islington, has already got in licensing system, which helps with quality of places. So it's that kind of thing is important to do. But it's innovative. It means bringing the community on board. But the fundamental attitude of housing has to be housing is a right for all of us to have somewhere over. What I wanted to do if we moved into government was to say, day one, rough sleeping homelessness is over. It was all over during COVID. It can be over now.
It was. I remember it very well.
Yeah.
I remember walking around while I was working and not seeing a single person sleeping on the streets.
And there were no rough sleepers.
Yeah.
For the first time ever.
Jeremy, I need to ask you about national service. Do you think that's a good idea?
No.
Why is that?
I think you achieve far more by consent than compulsion. I do think young people need to get opportunities. So the streaming system in school doesn't help opportunities. It creates a sense of alienation amongst those that are not top of the tree, those that don't get entered for all the GCSEs and so on. So you create a barrier from the age of about 14, 15 onwards. The idea of national service, as I understand it from Rishi Sunak, although I must say he sounded very confused about it the other day. I wasn't quite sure.
Not as confused as James Cleverly. I don't think he quite understood the policy at all when he was asked to speak about it.
Maybe he hadn't been told. I don't fully understand what it was. They went on to say it wasn't completely military service, it was other forms of service without specifying what they were. Well, I'm not happy about the idea that at 18 you should be compelled to do something, because you can see what's going to happen. You say, okay, all 18-year-olds have got going to national service. There's going to be exemptions for people studying this, doing that, etc. You can see how it's going to work. Those whose mum and dad have got sharp elbows, or uncle and auntie have got sharp elbows, and so on, will get out of it. Just like the sharp-elbowed parents got their kids out of the draft in Vietnam in the United States, and others will be forced to do it. What I do think is we have to make sure all young people are given an opportunity. College, university, apprenticeship, training, work, voluntary work, support, and not just be forgotten at the age of 18, because you need to ensure that young people grow into society where their purpose is encouraged and their artistic genius and imagination is encouraged as well. What we do is just completely ignore some young people that we label as failures. Nobody's a failure. You need to support them.
I think there is a good argument for the voluntary side of this, the voluntary scheme.
Voluntary stuff is fine. I mean, I see... I was at the fire brigade a bit ago. They've got fire cadets. Great. These are youngsters aged sort of 14 to 18, where they go once a week to the fire station, learn about the techniques, learn about first aid, learn about community, and then if they want to, can go on to do more advanced stuff, and some of them might enter the fire service later on. I think that's great. And I was talking to the youngsters there. They were so proud of it. and so pleased that they'd achieved this thing. And I was there for their sort of parade at the end of the year. I think that's great. That's fine. That's a choice they've made. And it's like, so you have to encourage young people to achieve things they can do well. I mean, I see a lot of youngsters in football training and football schools. They're not all going to be great footballers. Some of them are not that brilliant as footballers, but they get a lot out of it. They're doing stuff together. Likewise, I'm involved with a number of theatre groups locally, and we there get young people who are frankly not doing very well in school. Some of them are really not enjoying school or getting much out of it. And we have a theatre group, that Angel Shed Theatre, that any child can come to, anybody. There's no auditions, nothing like that. Just turn up and join in, write your own stuff. And it's fantastic. You just see them blossoming because they've given that space and the support. And that's what it's about.
So on the flip side of that, of those schemes that can be really beneficial to young people, there is the military scheme, which would, well, potentially require young people to go and serve their country. Do you think that young people at this moment in time would want to die for England?
No, I don't think young people want to join the army in large numbers. And I don't think compulsory service would bring it about. And indeed, I remember discussing this with people in the army, and they said, we do not want national service. We do not want people to join the army because they've been forced to. We don't want them. We want people that want to join. And I think it's going to be strongly opposed by the service chiefs. There is a interesting role in the armed service. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not in favour of wars. You're aware of that. But I remember talking to a group of people in the military who were asked to go to Sierra Leone for the Ebola crisis. And they were mostly army medics, but not all. Some were logistics and so on, lots of different skills. And they did very well, did a good job. So I said to them, what was it like? And they said two things. One is, I didn't realise I would learn so much. And two, I'd never felt so valued before.
Right.
And so there is an important role there in disaster alleviation. Also, I met sailors that had been plucking refugees out of the sea of Libya.
But you see, that's very different from war, isn't it?
Yes.
That's humanitarian work.
It's humanitarian. You're helping people. Yeah.
Do you think that if you were 18 in the circumstances that we're in right now, if we're experiencing the geopolitics that we're in, would you want to die for England?
I would want to bring about a world of peace, and that's what I was doing at that time. I think it's very sad that we're now in a situation where there are wars all around the world. Defence expenditure is rising to 2.5%, potentially 3% of GDP in Britain and elsewhere. This is not a time to be spending more on defence. It's a time to be trying to get a solution to crises. You can see what the effects of war are. We're not under threat of invasion in this country from anybody. What we are is a country that needs to have its social stresses dealt with.
Do you think you would have been a conscientious objector?
Well, in one level I was, because I refused to join the cadet force in school. And I was told I would never make anything of my life because I was too awkward.
Oh.
Charming, isn't it?
Very nice. Very encouraging.
So motivating. It motivated me anyway.
Yeah? Well, what have you done with your life?
This and that. Here and there. Done this, that, done that.
Okay, so let's talk about the election broadly, just to finish off. So what do you think is going to happen? We've got 5 weeks now. What do you think the outcome is?
As of now, the Conservatives are heading for quite a big defeat. Reform are around 10% or so, which is mainly former Conservative voters, and a kind of unenthusiastic majority or unenthusiastic bloc are going to vote Labour. So at the moment it looks like there would be a Labour government with an overall majority, but it's very interesting. You just look carefully at the figures. The opinion polling last Thursday, Wednesday night, Thursday, when the election was announced, was exactly the reverse of the opinion polling in 2017 when we were on 23%, the Conservatives were on 43%, and the result was 41-42 in the end. There's a lot could change.
So a lot to play for.
And there's Labour need to be very careful that they are not offering anything that excites anybody. Merely opposing a Conservative government is not enough. There's no excitement in it. There's no hope in it of what young people can look forward to in society. Hope is a very precious commodity, and it's not on offer.
So a big concern with apathy. If they're not offering, they won't get it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm going to be out there. I'll be doing my campaigning locally, and the nicest thing about elections is the huge number of people that come up and want to talk to you. So and Islington is full of cafes that got seats outside. Great. Sit down, take your coffee, and you can be there all day if you want to. It took me an hour and a half to get out of Newington Green on Sunday afternoon. Every time I was about to go, just a word.
And you weren't even near the Jeremy Corbyn cafe at that point?
Not even in the right cafe. No, I was in Lizzie on the Green.
Thanks
very much. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.